Okay, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Our speaker today is a known name to most of you. Some of you have met him, traveled with him, have been introduced to him in our previous session, or have just come across him as a speaker in other webinars as well. But we're not passing the opportunity to introduce Surya Ramachandran, an exceptional naturalist and expert wildlife photographer. He has been involved in the world of wildlife for the last 10 years. This engineer by profession took a leap of faith to follow his passion and has never looked back since. He interned in Satpura with Hashim Tayebji's Forsyth Lodge, and then went on to become their leading naturalist. He then moved on to spend some time in Kanha, where he authored, a photo field guide to Central India, first of its kind guide covering about 850 species. Most of you know that Surya has spent a considerable amount of time in Ladakh because we did a session a few weeks back. But I would like to highlight that Surya's interest in smaller mammals and other hard-to-spot species have formed the basis of a lot of his trips and explorations. And among a lot of other places, he has spent time exploring the forests that form a part of the Terai Arc in northern India. And closer home, he has identified wildlife hotspots in South India that for some reason have evaded the interest of wildlife. Today, Surya will be introducing to us some of the wildest corners of South India that can be easily woven in or included without much of a deviation into your regular South India itineraries. From my interaction with Surya, I know he possesses a unique ability to combine his knowledge as a naturalist, his expert skill as a wildlife photographer, and his desire to share and express to others the unique features and endemic life that each region possesses, along with emphasizing the importance of recognizing and protecting natural cycles which keep our ecosystem vibrant, alive, and dynamic. Over to you, Surya.
Thank you, Soumya. That was very sweet. I'm just going to share my screen now. Hello, everyone. Just a quick few things. I am living in one of the...
Sorry, before you start off, Rahul, again, I'll have to tell everybody, could everyone stop your videos? And I'm going to mute everybody now so that we have maximum people getting to see this. So please hold on. I'll just mute. Yeah, we can't, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect. You can go ahead.
So, hi everyone. I'm also going to turn off my video during the time of the presentation, just to save bandwidth. I do not live in a city in South India. I live in one of the wildest spots. So if there is a little bit of a wind or a storm which comes in, I might lose a little bit of connectivity. So just to be on the safe side, I'm turning my internet off. And I think that with that, we are ready to jump into the wilderness of South India. In fact, this is the first time I'm talking about a destination where I am actually living in right now. I've learned a lot of talks in Central India and Ladakh and the Himalayas, all of it from South India. But this is the first time I'm talking about a place where I'm actually right now in. And this is my backyard, a place which is very close to my heart. I've been exploring the various regions of South India over the last decade. And it is a vast area. There's a lot going on here, but I think I have been able to condense without doing too much of justice to a lot of other places, but I have identified some hotspots like Soumya said that we can talk about today. So just to make people aware of what I consider South India, South India is a term which has varying definitions in different parts of India. So for me, South India would be these 5 states plus Goa, I would consider as part of South India. So it'll be Goa, Karnataka, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, and Kerala. And that is the southern peninsula of India, which juts into the Indian Ocean. So just to be clear, some people consider South India just to be Tamil Nadu and Kerala. Some people may not include Telangana. Some people may not include Goa. But for me, I'm going to be talking about this entire chunk. So if you look at this picture, I'd like to start off here. Everything that you see in this frame from whatever is sold to what she wears, or the different the makeup she's put on, the bangles. Everything is something that is unique to South India, and you generally do not come across any of these things in the north. And that is how different South India is. For that matter, any part of India can be from the other. But since you are taking such a large chunk of India and talking about it, you can be pretty sure that a lot of it is very unique to South India. And that is what makes it like, if you visit South India and you do the Golden Triangle, or you visit the Himalayas, you're looking at it as three different countries, and that's how vastly different they can be. So over the years, South India, at least in my experience over the last decade, has not, in fact, been among the mainstream talking points when it comes to wilderness tourism. It has always been about the temples, the culture, the streets, the food. It has been about some of the most beautiful architectural sites that could include townships and towns like Pondicherry or Fort Kochi or Mysore or Madurai and places like that, or the great temples of the Kaveri Delta. But we seldom talk about wildlife here. And these things are quite unique and beautiful for sure. But there is a lot more happening here. And of course, you have the beaches of the West Coast, all the way from Kovalam till Goa, a lot of it popular for, and most of them becoming a favorite place to finish off trips in India because of how calming and soothing they can be after a rugged road travel through the Indian country, especially with the cows and buffaloes out to get you. And of course, the one other aspect of South India that has been highlighted in my experience has been the hills. And of course, when I say hills, it has been mostly the plantations of coffee, tea, and cardamom, some of which have set up beautiful properties amongst these estates. And they have been inviting a lot of people to come taste the teas, walk the plantations, and kind of relive the old planters' lifestyle, the gentleman planters' lifestyle of the old British days. And that is kind of what I have come across in my experience of travels in South India, at least amongst the people who come into India from abroad. But what I wish to say here is, all of these places can be easily interwoven with something related to wildlife, because there is wildlife all over the place in South India. And when I talk about wildlife in South India, I'm going to be asking all of you to have a slight shift in your approach to a wilderness site. This is not a conventional get in the morning, put on your hot water bottles and your shawls, get into an open jeep and drive in, get your park fees. No. In South India, wildlife, people, landscapes, culture, all of it is extremely homogeneous, as what I'm going to be telling you right now. Everything goes hand in hand. So it is very easy to mix and match, but it's also very important to keep an eye out always and be aware that you can actually break from a temple in Madurai and go and see some elephants. And that's how interesting it is when one is talking about the wilderness of South India. So before we start talking about the biodiversity or the habitats or the great animals and birds that we have hidden in the South Indian forests, I'd like to give you a little bit of a rundown of the lay of the land. Of course, this is South India again, like I mentioned. This is the Western Ghat mountain range along which hugs the western coast of South India, which is the moist rainforests of South India with the high peaks, grasslands, and endemic shola forests, which I'll be talking about in a while. And on the opposite side, we have the Eastern Ghats, which is a more subtle mountain range with a lot of broken peaks. So the Eastern Ghats comes on the other end, hugging the eastern coast. And in the middle of all this, you have the dry Deccan Plateau. And when I say dry Deccan Plateau, it's simply because the monsoon winds come in from the Arabian Sea, and the Western Ghats are blocking the winds. And very little of the moisture-laden clouds get past to give rain to the Deccan Plateau. And of course, you have the major rivers flowing, which are born in the Western Ghats in the high Shola forests, and then flow eastward towards the Bay of Bengal, which include the Godavari, the Krishna, the Kaveri, the Vaigai, and many such rivers flow from west to east in South India. So that is the lay of the land. That should give you some kind of an idea. So the rainforests are here, the dry grasslands and scrub is here. There are smaller hills on this side. And of course, you have the beaches and the coastline on either side. So that is roughly what you need to know before we jump into South Indian wildlife. So the Western Ghats, like I'm just going back to this slide, the Western Ghats, like I told you, extends all the way from, in fact, it goes all the way to Bombay, but in our region, it extends all the way from Goa till the southern tip of India along this whole stretch. So in this region, I've picked out a few hotspots based on their habitat difference and the ability for the avid traveler to go seek some of the important wildlife that call Western Ghats their home. In fact, some of the endemic wildlife, in fact, most of them can be seen in these hotspots. So I'm just going to initially talk about three plantation towns. One is Valparai, other is Munnar, and then in between these two, there is a small sanctuary called Chinnar. So there is Valparai, Munnar, and Chinnar. So just keep that in mind. I'm just going to run it together because the habitat and the kind of place they are is one, but we will be talking about different wildlife in different places. So this is how the Western Ghats looks, at least in the higher mountain ranges. So this is all grassland, which is the soak pits for the rains, and which is the reason for the great rivers of South India being originated here. And in all these valleys, you have a very peculiar forest type called the sholas. So this is a very stunted forest because of the high winds in these mountains. And also these forests are fantastic when it comes to the biodiversity that they support. In fact, in this picture, if you look closely, you can see there's a shola forest here. And the next forest separated by two mountains of grassland will be somewhere here. So there is also a lot of geological separation when it comes to these forests. So every shola patch can be unique in its own way compared to the next one. So when you take a shola forest in Karnataka and one in Kerala and one in Tamil Nadu, you can be pretty sure that they have their own set of wildlife which is unique to that shola. In fact, different species. So that is kind of how the biodiversity of South India is so intense, because these shola islands of forests form their own biodiversity over the years of geological separation. So this is the shola. This is how the Western Ghats looks: rocky cliffs, grasslands, shola forests, small towns, and that is pretty much what the Western Ghats is all about. And this is how a shola forest looks inside. Just look at it. It is one of those forests which is considered to be moist and wet through the year. And that is why you have plants like this big leaf that you see here. This is a cyathea, or a giant tree fern, which is considered to be one of the oldest plants in the world. In fact, the other place where you would have seen this plant is along with dinosaurs in paintings, because they did exist along with these extinct animals during the Jurassic and Cretaceous eras. So streams flowing through, lot of plants, a wet, dense forest flow, and a huge network of interwoven trees, and of course, a lot of wildlife inhabiting these forests. So that is the inside view of a shola. But unfortunately, over the years, people realized that the rainfall here, the open grasslands were very easily convertible to cultivable land. So especially for larger plantations like, one second. Okay, especially for larger plantations of tea, coffee, cardamom, these forest lands, especially the grasslands, became very easy places to convert. So most of your shola forests and high mountain ranges of the Western Ghats, at least the accessible areas, I'm not talking about the ones that you can trek to, I'm talking about the ones that you tend to drive through, most of them have some remnant shola forests and estates all around. So it has been a huge loss of biodiversity over the years, but there is still a ray of hope, as this picture would show. So this is a tea estate in one of these hill towns that I'm talking about. And when we were birding around in these tea estates, in fact, there is a very good bird life in these estates, we came across this animal here. So it's not a great picture, but it gives you an idea of the landscape and the biodiversity that I'm talking about. So here you have a leopard, and there are many such leopards which live amongst the tea, feeding on dogs, barking deer, wild boar. There are bears which live amongst the tea. There is elephants, there is gaur, there is sambar. So there is a whole lot of wildlife which has over the years come to accept that these plantations are secure and the tea bushes are tall enough to provide them with some cover. And there is some remnant shola forest around for them to take refuge in if necessary. So there is a lot of wildlife in these private tea plantations. And this is another picture from the Nilgiris, which is where I'm from. And this picture was taken barely about 45 minutes from my house. And South India does have one of the highest numbers of black leopards, which are basically uh, called black panthers popularly in the world, but they're essentially melanistic leopards, or leopards with extra infusion of the melanin pigmentation. So they become black. So this is a mating pair, a male leopard and a female. And these two are also sitting on a rock, which is nestled among tea plantations. So when you talk about South Indian wildlife, the first thing that comes to my mind, at least, or a lot of people's mind, would be elephants, because of the large contiguous forests and plantations which are actually secure to pass through. Elephants have moved through a vast part of South India, including parts of the Deccan, parts of the Western Ghats, and even now recently parts of the Eastern Ghats. So elephants are colonizing different parts of South India, and in fact, they are growing to new areas. So most of the elephant population is migratory, and very often you see them along the side of the road or in plantations or even sometimes in big towns. But some elephants have, as you can see this guy here, have become used to certain areas and they stopped migrating. And in fact, this particular elephant is actually occupying the place where we buy tickets to go into Araviculam National Park in Munnar. And we had to wait to get the tickets before we can go see wildlife, till he leaves at least. So that is what I'm talking about when I'm saying the way we see wildlife or come across wildlife in South India, or even go seeking wildlife in South India, is something very unique. So when I talk about large animals which require a very important forest type for themselves, like elephants, then you can imagine the lesser fauna and the smaller birds being accessible in non-protected areas. So most of the tourism we do here, or wildlife activities we do here, would be in non-tourism areas or non-protected wildlife areas. So as you can see, these elephants very often move through tea plantations in big herds. Sometimes the lone tuskers move through the plantations. Some of them stay back. So there is always a chance to see elephants in towns like Valparai and Munnar. And that is where we actually go in search of them. And some animals have adapted to city life in a better way than some others. So this gaur, especially the gaurs of the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve, are pretty much roaming around our towns. They will come into houses, raid the trash cans, feed on the apple and peach trees, and they go about their own business. And you can walk past them. Some people even feed them, which is not so great. But all I'm trying to show through these pictures is that wildlife in great numbers, and in numbers that we sometimes see in central Indian parks, is there along the side of the road in South India in some spots, especially if you have a good guide or a good local person who knows what he's talking about. Most of the wildlife viewing can be done around your tea plantation visits, can be done around your temple visits, or even on the way to your beaches. And that is how the wildlife in South India is. So when we talk about the Sholas and the Western Ghats, we spoke about endemism. And I'd like to talk about one animal to start with. And this is one of my favorite animals of South India. This is the lion-tailed macaque. I don't know why they named this beautiful animal after its tail, because I feel the tail is not really much. It has a beautiful mane like a lion. So it should be a lion-maned macaque or something, but it is what it is. So these animals are highly endangered and found only in very small pockets of forest in the Western Ghats. And recent research has shown that they require a particular set of trees to be found in a forest patch for them to survive in. Most of these are fruiting trees. But thanks to efforts of some tea planting societies and NGOs, what has happened is these lion-tailed macaques have become used to people, and also have started making a comeback in some of these forest types. And sites like these are possible in Valparai now, just along the side of the road, with large troops of lion-tailed macaques all over the place. And for me, seeing lion-tailed macaques walking around me, raiding houses, raiding kitchens, the alpha male sitting on top of the tree, seeing things like that for like 3 or 4 hours, just sitting by the side of the road or in the front yard of someone's house, I feel that is a great wilderness experience. In fact, one of the top wilderness experiences of South India, simply because you are not just going in, seeing something flitting by and making a tick. You're actually getting to know the animal, spending hours photographing it, watching it, maybe taking a break, and all of this from the comfort without the hassle of a safari getting over or your time getting over. So images like these are possible, or even getting as close to these macaques like this is possible thanks to this boundaryless wilderness viewing. And of course, when you talk about forests, you're going to have multiple primates, especially in rainforests. And this is the golden-maned Nilgiri langur, which looks very similar to a lion-tailed macaque for a novice. But of course, they have a tail which is almost twice their body length. So this is the tail, and of course, they have a golden shorter mane. So that's a Nilgiri langur. And of course, in these mountains, especially in the cliffs amongst the grasslands and the tea plantations, we have the Nilgiri tahr. In fact, the elephant which was blocking the ticket counter was blocking access to one of the last healthy habitats of the Nilgiri tahr in the Western Ghats. That's Ervikulam National Park. So Nilgiri tahr is the only mountain goat that we have in South India. And usually they occupy the cliffs and grassland perches, like I told you. But seeing them just like this, balancing themselves on the cliff sides, feeding on the tufts of grasses that grow between the rocks here, or seeing a saddleback male. This is a saddleback male walking amongst the herd. It's one of the sights to behold, I would say, in South India. And again, an animal which can watch at your own pace and take your time to take it all in. And of course, we in South India, when you have rainforests and a lot of endemism, you'll have a whole lot of wildlife, lesser wildlife, which can be equally or sometimes more interesting than the larger wildlife. So when we talk about things like Nilgiri martens or the brown mongoose or the mouse deer or the grizzled giant squirrel or the flying squirrels or this very cute animal called the spiny dormouse, all of these animals, you would think you'll have to go off the way to look for them. No. We sometimes find them on tea walks. We sometimes have spots for them amongst coffee plantations. We look for them in areas where you have elephants, tigers, leopards, sloth bears. So it is not that the other larger wildlife isn't there. It is that there is so much more happening here that you go seeking these and the other larger wildlife you will see on the side. So when you have such a huge mammal diversity, and I'm talking about almost 143 different mammals, so you can imagine that I cannot complete all of them in this short talk, but 143 mammal types is what we have in South India, and over 650 bird species. In fact, one of the top birding experiences, I would say, anywhere in India is in some particular valleys in South India where you can stand on the edge of the cliff and look down upon huge flocks of over 30 to 40 of these large great Indian hornbills soaring below. And every time they flap their wing, it's like someone started a helicopter or something. So seeing birds like this in their natural element, just from a cliffside, and you can spend hours and hours doing this. I would say that is what birding is all about to me. But having said that, you do also have a lot of endemic species in South India simply because of the rich shola forests in these mountains. So in the Western Ghats, you have beautiful endemics like the black and orange flycatcher, the Nilgiri laughing thrush, and many such others, which are found in different habitats. And you also have special migratory birds like this. This is the Kashmir flycatcher, which breeds in Kashmir and Balochistan. And without making a stop anywhere, winters in the high peaks of the Nilgiris and Sri Lanka. And that is how special it is, this bird. And this is a beautiful male. And they come almost to the same bush year after year. And some of these can be in someone's garden. So we even go to people's houses to see them. Sometimes it can be in the local public playgrounds. They could be anywhere. So some of these birds are so used to coming to the same bush that we go seeking birds like this in different spots, sometimes amongst town and sometimes in the wilderness. So we've been speaking about the high mountains of the Western Ghats, but remember I told you the monsoon winds come from the west. So most of the rains falls on one side of the Western Ghats. And that is where we are going next, which is the Tattekad Bird Sanctuary or the Salim Ali Bird Sanctuary, which is a protected area in the foothills of the Western Ghats. And this place is known for this particular bird. This is the Sri Lankan frogmouth, a very odd looking nocturnal bird which stays through the day on sticks like this, motionless and relying entirely on its camouflage. So this is a very good picture, but if you look at this bird in a dense rainforest, and the guides in Tattekad are very good at finding them, you will have to probably sometimes spend hours staring at a branch before you can see them. And I'm not joking when I say this. And that is how interesting it is to see birds like this. And then, of course, in the evening, they fly out and catch insects amongst the forest, and that's what they do. And this is Tattekad Bird Sanctuary in the foothills of the Western Ghats, barely an hour from Cochin town. So this is a unique habitat of Tattekad, the Myristica swamp, and the Periyar River flows through this park. And of course, you have taller trees and much more diverse tree growth in this area because it is a flatter foothill sea level forest. And when I say a bird, it's a birding or a bird sanctuary, I'm talking about almost 400 bird species recorded in an area which is 25 square kilometer. It's a very tiny park, but very beautiful with some fantastic trails for wildlife and birding. And you get most of the beautiful special endemic birds of South India in this park. So even migratory species like the black baza, which comes from Burma and Northeast India in the winter months to Tattekad. There's this beautiful 12-colored oriental dwarf kingfisher, which breeds in Tattekad in the monsoons and spends the rest of the year dispersed around Tattekad. You have blue-eared kingfishers, and you have a whole lot of residents which are unique to this park and other such habitats of South India. But let me tell you why Tattekad is special, why the 25 square kilometers of Tattekad is special. It's simply because of the guides there. The guides in Tattekad have been birding this forest for all their lives almost. Some of them start at the age of 5 or 6, and they know the forest and the birds better than anyone else. I would say probably better than any birding guide anywhere else in India. So when you're looking for birds like this in the forest or in the day or in the night, sometimes you'll be looking for specialities like the Sri Lankan bay owl at night, or the great-eared nightjar at night. They know exactly where to go and find them. And that is something which is special to Tattekad, and including the Sri Lankan frogmouth or any other bird. Tattekad is what it is today because of the guides. And going out with one of those chaps for a birding experience, maybe even for 3 to 4 days, I would say will not be time wasted. Just take a look at this one before we move on. It's one of my favorite birds, so I'm taking some time off for this. It's called a heart-spotted woodpecker, and it has heart-shaped spots on its wings, especially on the white panel on the flanks of its wings. And that's where it gets its name from. And I think it's one of the prettiest birds in India for me. I mean, every time I see it, I just get so excited. So Tattekad, we spoke about birds, but like any forest, this one also has its own story with regards to mammals. And when I do my South India tours, I go here specifically looking for the slender loris at night. So when you go looking for the owls at night, we keep an eye out with a red light torch to scan the canopy of the trees. And we sometimes chance upon 2 fireballs staring back at us. Those are the 2 eyes of the slender loris, which is an old world nocturnal insectivorous monkey, which is found in the forests of Tattekad. So again, it is not just birds. There is a lot more happening here. And I'm not even getting into plants or orchids or birds or dragonflies or butterflies. Of course, not birds, dragonflies or butterflies, but I'm just talking about mammals and birds at this moment. So we've seen a little bit of the Western Ghats, but remember South India is so big, we've only covered one small section here. I'd like to talk a little bit about the forests of the Deccan Plateau, especially the forests around Mysore, which is Nagarhole National Park or Kabini, and Ranganathitu Bird Sanctuary, which is a small offshoot of the Kaveri River where people can go by boat in search of birds. So this is Kabini, the quintessential safari experience of South India. Of course, you have jeeps, open jeeps, a lot of lodges. You have herds of deer. Sometimes herds sizes can be over 200. A very healthy park with a huge diversity of animals. Of course, you have a very high number of Bengal tigers here. It is probably one of the best places in India to look for the Indian leopard. And sometimes this is probably the only place in India where you often see them sitting on trees or sometimes on old temples, like this guy is doing. He's actually called the temple male because he controls the forest around this old temple, which is inside Nagarhole National Park. It's also one of the best places I have come across in India to look for large packs of Indian wild dog, or dhole, as they're called, D-H-O-L-E. And because you have large herds of spotted deer, gaur, sambar, packs of sometimes even 24, 25 dogs can often be seen in this park. And of course, like every other park, it has its own set of special animals. You have herds of gaur. The backwaters where you can go by boat in Kabini are very good for otters, crocodiles, very good birding like this white-bellied woodpecker that you see. And specialties like the striped-necked mongoose and different monkey types. So there's a lot happening in Kabini on these safaris. And recently, it's also been made popular, extra popular, because of one particular black leopard, which is there in the tourism area of the Kabini Tiger Reserve. And a lot of people have been flocking there from all around the world to get pictures of this black leopard, which is extra comfortable with jeeps, which is an unusual thing. But every park, Kabini has also has its own story or one special time of the year, and that is the summers, when almost 1,500 elephants from all the surrounding forests of Wayanad, Coorg, Nilgiris congregate in the backwaters of the Kabini Reservoir, because in the summer months the reservoir is shrunk and large areas of grass, fresh grass growth is visible. So almost 1,500, sometimes 1,600 elephants congregate in this area, and you go see them by boat. And when you go on the boat safari on these banks, I've counted almost 400 to 500 elephants on a single boat safari. So you can actually imagine how many elephants come to this area. And that is definitely one of the spectacles or one of the highlights of South Indian wilderness phenomena. It's quite something. And the summer months, and that's when you see it. In fact, there's a lot of history with regards to this elephant migration, because this is where the Maharajas of Mysore and some other nearby Maharajas used to come and capture elephants. Sometimes with kedas or trained elephants, they used to capture elephants here because this is the best place for them to pick and choose the elephants they want and capture them. And that's what happened till almost very recently, till the early 20th century. And of course, Ranganathitu, like I told you, is a fantastic place to get up close with birds. You can get close to them, photograph them. It has a multitude of habitats like sandbanks, rocks. And of course, it is a very good place to look at crocodiles, as you can see. So Ranganathitu is just about 30 minutes from Mysore. So people who stay in Mysore can take a morning off, go there, do a boat ride. The guides, the boatmen are very good with their birds, and then come back to Mysore to do your heritage walks or your food tours. So it's again something very easy to put together. Like even Kabini is about 1.5 hours from Mysore town, and it has its own properties for sure. But it is possible to take a break from Mysore and maybe do a night or two in Kabini in some of the nicer properties there, and come back to your general circuit that you wish to do in South India. I would advise doing a whole wildlife circuit, but let's see what the situation is in the future. So we are going to go further into the Deccan now to a place called Daroji, which is the sloth bear sanctuary in North Karnataka. And suddenly you can see that in South India, we have gone from the high grasslands and Shola forests with full of biodiversity in the Western Ghats to this granite infested landscape. These are called Dharwad cratons, which are basically large conglomerates of granite, which is the remnants of the last volcano which created the Deccan Plateau. And in these dry, rocky environment, we go looking for this animal, which is the sloth bear. And sloth bears are definitely seen in a large part of India. But what is unique about Daroji is that you see them in great numbers in these rocks. And how you see them is also you sit on these watchtowers and just stare at these conglomerate of rocks. And in the evening, or sometimes in the morning, you get a large number of bears coming out to feed. And for some reason, most of the female bears in India are not territorial. So sometimes you may even have sites like this when multiple adult bears can be seen together when food is in plenty. And this is barely an hour's drive from the town of the historical town of Hampi. So again, not a very offbeat thing, but it is one of the highlights of Indian wildlife. So of course, when you have such a drastic change in landscape, you're going to have some specialty birds which are adapted to this dry, rocky environs, like the painted spurfowl, the yellow-throated bulbul, red-necked falcons, owls. There's a lot happening here also, and it's not just the bears that we're talking about. So let me just remind you here, before I wrap up, that South India is all of this, and we've only spoken about some parts of Tamil Nadu, some parts of Kerala, and some parts of Karnataka. Of course, there are such places in Goa too, and other such places like Tattekad in Goa and Karnataka. But it is very hard to talk about each of those destinations. But according to me, these destinations would be the highlight for someone who's seeking a good amount of wilderness viewing. Of course, one other option which I've left out here is the tea town of Wayanad and the surrounding plantations. Again, a fantastic place for wildlife with some very good properties. So one other thing I wish to tell you here is the rainfall pattern. You can see that the Western Ghats gets most of the rainfall. Parts of the Eastern Ghats get a little bit of the rainfall, whereas the Deccan and the southeastern plains of Tamil Nadu are overall dry. But despite all this, all of the wildlife we've spoken about till now in this presentation, or all the destinations I've spoken about till now in the presentation, are for 12 months. We don't have a wildlife season here because most of the wildlife viewing is in bird sanctuaries or in protected areas and non-protected areas, I'm sorry. And even parks like Nagarhole, Daroji and Tattekad are open for 12 months of the year. So it is possible, if one is willing to brave a little bit of showers and some slushy ground, it is possible to actually come and see all of this wildlife even during the monsoons. I mean, all you require is 1 or 2 clear days, and you can go out and get the birds, get the endemic wildlife, and still be able to get a satisfactory wilderness tour. And of course, with architecture, the buildings aren't going anywhere. So I'm pretty sure that's also an on thing for the 12 months. So unlike the rest of India, the wilderness season here is 12 months around. And if you come during the monsoons, you get a bonus. You get the frogs, the butterflies, the flying lizards, you get dragonflies, and you get a whole lot of other things which you generally do not see in the winter months. And when I talk about butterflies, I'm talking about over 360 species. I'm talking about 240 species of frogs, including very pretty ones like this, and a lot of reptiles. And when I say reptiles, some of you may be averse to snakes. I'm not just talking about snakes. I'm talking about specialities like this Draco, which is a gliding lizard. You have fan-throated lizards. You have a whole lot of different things happening in South India. And just this dragonfly deserves a mention. This endemic dragonfly or damselfly is called the Myristica sapphire. When I heard the name for the first time, I didn't even know what it looked like. I just wanted to go see it. And that's how beautiful it is, the Myristica sapphire. And you get it in swamps, in Myristica swamps, like what I showed you in Tattekad. And of course, there is a lot of biodiversity when it comes to reptiles. You have beautiful iridescent snakes. You have the fan-throated lizard with a beautiful fan that spreads and waves with the wind to attract the female and to rival other males. And of course, you have the largest venomous snake in the world, the king cobra, which is which has its own dedicated area in Agumbe, which is in Karnataka. So there is a lot happening here for people of varied interests. And all of this can be interwoven with a very simple South India itinerary, which most of you already have. And we are not even talking about orchids. We are not talking about flowers or hikes, trekking paths, plantation experiences, or anything of that sort. We're just touching upon some of the highlights of South India. And one such highlight, since we're not talking about flora, I just like to mention this one thing. This is the Strobilanthes bloom, which happens once in 12 years in the Western Ghats. And nothing you've ever seen in your life, including the Drakensberg in South Africa or the tulip gardens in Netherlands, and I have seen all of this, nothing will prepare you for this pink blossom of the Strobilanthes or the Kurunji flower of South India as it carpets the grasslands of the Western Ghats. And sites like this are everywhere in the Western Ghats if you time your trip correctly. So this is something, a personal project of mine. This is something which I'm putting together to make sure presentations like this aren't daunting for people who listen to them. So this is a book of almost 1,950 species of South India, and it should be out soon. It's something which I've been working on, and this should make everyone comfortable when they come into South India to look for the wildlife. And that is something which I'm doing from my end, along with a very close colleague of mine, David. And hopefully it should be out with all of you soon in the coming months. Thank you so much. I hope you were able to get a picture of South India. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks, Surya.
Nothing, Sanjay.
Questions?
Yes.
We have some questions on the chat box, but if anyone wants to unmute themselves and ask questions.
Can one of you read it, Soumya, if you don't mind?
Yeah. I think Kay has asked a question about Kabini.
Okay.
I think what she wanted to know was what is the best time to visit Kabini, and even though you mentioned summers is the highlight, perhaps if someone can't do summers or something, you may want to kind of elaborate on that.
Like, of course, when I said summer is the highlight, K, I was generally mentioning about particularly the elephant congregation and nothing else. All the other wildlife is seen throughout the year, including elephants, including large tuskers. All of these are seen through the year. So it is not that the summer is the best time. So I've been to Kabini, in fact, only during the rains. And all my pictures from Kabini, including the tiger, the leopards, the wild dogs, the elephants, all of them are from the monsoon time in South India. I've never actually been to Kabini because I work in Ladakh, like Soumya mentioned. So during the winter months, I spend with snow leopards. So when I have time, Kabini is just a few hours from my house. So I go during the rains and you see everything there. And if someone tells you wildlife viewing is not good in the monsoons, either they have never been to a forest or they've never been to a forest in the monsoons, because most of the wildlife is territorial. The tigers are territorial. None of them are going to leave their territories. And in Indian parks, we have good roads nowadays. So with the good vehicles, people do get through the slush. So the wilderness viewing is great. And I would say there should be nothing stopping you from visiting Nagarhole at any other time of the year.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Vivek has a question, Surya. He wants to know if there are if there are any options for clients to do some voluntary work around wildlife conservation in South India.
Well, there is plenty of options. Like I told you, I volunteer with the NCF every year. That's one place I volunteer with in Valparai. Nature Conservation Foundation, that's the NCF. They work heavily with creating organic plantations out of the existing plantations, and also trying to create rainforests or rainforest corridors so that animals can actually pass through these plantations very easily. So they're working on that front. So they do a lot of replanting work in Valparai. And of course, there are people doing very good work on studying king cobras in Agumbe. There are some people working with marshlands, especially coastal wetlands, because that is a habitat which is fast dying out. And you have the grasslands trust in North Karnataka and the Deccan working with wolves. So there is a whole lot of things happening. And sometimes all it boils down to is what you're interested in. And you have everything from short stints of a few weeks or even a few days to something that you can do for a month or two, things like that. So there is a lot happening in South India in that regard. Yes.
Surya, would you anyway want to leave your email ID? So if anyone wants details, they can then write to you.
Yeah, you can just type it there.
You can just leave
I'm just
your
going to see who all the participants are and decide whether I want to leave the real ID or the fake ID. I'm just typing in my email ID in the chat box. So those of you who wish to contact
Vivek
me.
had another question.
Yeah, Vivek can come if he wants. I mean, I think he's on the...
Yes. No, thanks a lot, Surya. That's really helpful. I'll definitely be in touch with you regarding the voluntary work, and also, when is the next blossom for the Kurunji flowers?
Neelakurinji.
So Vivek, like I told you, it happens once in 12 years.
Mm-hmm.
But when I say once in 12 years, the Strobilanthes, every bush flowers once in 12 years.
Okay.
So usually what happens is one landscape will have one set of bushes,
Mm-hmm.
which will flower once in 12 years. So, for example, 2 years back, it was Ervikulam National Park in Munna.
Okay.
But last year we saw another huge bloom in the Nilgiris.
Yeah.
And so there are different populations of flowering in 12-year cycles,
Mm-hmm.
but the 12-year cycle could be different for each landscape.
Oh, I see.
So
Okay.
if you're planning a trip, it is very easy to get in touch with a local guide or
Yeah.
your local DMC or whoever it is,
Yeah.
and try to get the information and try to weave a tour around that. In fact, even Sri Lanka, Nuwara Eliya in Sri Lanka, Houghton Plains National Park,
Mm-hmm.
does have Strobilanthes, because it is, if you look at it geologically, it is an extension of the Western Ghats. So their blossom I think it is going to be 3 or 4 years from now, or 3 years from now. The last one was in 2014, if I remember right.
Okay.
So you're going to have different populations blooming at different times of the year. So all you need to know is get to know what is going to happen that year, and make sure you're there at the right time.
Okay. All right. No, thanks a lot. Thank you.
Any other questions? Anyone else? No?
Lovely presentation.
Ah, that's Jayant.
Oh,
Yes.
thank you. Jen. Yeah.
Yeah. Very, very knowledgeable.
I hope your song that you're going to make is as good. I was listening. I wasn't there on video then, but I had to listen in.
No, but
South Indians, we do eavesdrop. So.
with your knowledge, you made us all, speechless. Seriously.
Absolutely.
Yeah, mind
Thank you,
boggling.
Jen. Thank you, Jen. Look forward to seeing you all in South India.
Yeah, sure, definitely. I worked with David. I was lucky enough to have gone with David a couple of times. But
Where was this?
In Satpura.
Okay. I was with David in Satpura when you came. For sure, but
Forsyths.
I probably was in someone else.
Ah,
So me and David and another friend of mine, Varun, we were there together for 5 years in Satpura. So
Even Rishi was there, right?
Yeah,
Rishi was the manager. Yes, yes, of course. Yeah. So
Yeah.
all of us were there. So
yeah.
So it's good that you came to Forsyth and Satpura. It's definitely one of the nicer parks in the country for sure.
Yeah. Next time we'll try to meet you.
Mhm. Perfect.
Right now, it looks like you have to come home only.
So So I think a lot of people have requested for the presentation, and Surya, a lot of people have requested for the map that you used in the presentation.
Oh, those maps are from my book, so I'll have to wait for the book to come out and give you all a book.
Also,
those maps we actually custom did for our books. There's no other map.
It was not there yesterday during a dry run, Surya.
It was.
Not? It was.
Yeah,
it
was there. It was there, Sanjay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So these are maps
but,
which we made for our book. So those
Okay.
maps you won't get anywhere else.
Also, Surya, maybe for your previous book, the first book, if people want to order that, maybe we can send a link of that along with the presentation.
Oh, it's there on Amazon. All you have to do is type
Perfect.
what I'm typing on the chat box, which is
Yeah. Great.
Perfect.
Okay, so if
I've got the presentation with me. I can always send it if there's anybody wanting it.
So if there are no questions, then I'd just like to introduce our next web series where we attempt to take you through a very fascinating journey, tracking the Indian Himalayas from Kashmir in the west to Arunachal in the east. In this marathon, we are guided by Amar Grover, someone who gave up his law career to travel. And today he's a copywriter, an accomplished travel writer, and a photographer whose works have been published in some of the leading travel magazines as well as some of the dailies in UK. So join us next Tuesday, 28 July, 11 a.m. See you all next week. I think Sanjay will send everyone the presentation. If there's anything else, you can write to Surya directly or get in touch with Sanjay or any one of us.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you, Sanjay.
Thank you, Surya,
Thank you, Soumya.
Sanjay, Soumya. Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.